Hi everyone, this is Oksana and this is the pendant we're going to be making in this video. This is what it looks like when the copper has been oxidized, which I have a video on how to do that if you're interested. I use liver of sulfur to darken it because I think that helps see this texture. But it has this beautiful textured swirl and I think it's really fun. So if you want to see how I made this, just keep watching. So I'm starting out with some 20 gauge square copper wire. Mine is from riogrande.com. And I am using 3 pieces. So let me measure these out for you. They're 9 inches long. And my stone, it's a little Cinnabar stone that is in the shape of a teardrop. And it is little bit less than an inch. It's about 24 millimeters. So I'm going to be using this half round wire. It's 24 gauge half round wire, dead soft, and I'm going to be using this to connect these 3 wires together. So if you just hold the 3 wires together, find the middle of them, then we're just going to take the little end of this wire and wrap it around the 3 to connect it. And then I know I still have more of this tail end, but let's pretend I run out, because I want to show you what to do with the other side. So this side is still connected to the spool, so we're going to flip it over now and say you want to keep going. This is probably enough of a connection. Then you would just guide this with your hand and you would turn the piece because it's connected to the spool. The half round wire will get twisted if you just wrap it around normally like we did with the little end. And then once you are satisfied with the length of this connection, you grab your wire cutters and you trim so that the little wire ends are both on the same side. And then we're just gonna press that down. Like that. So because my stone is a teardrop and it has a point on the bottom of it, this connection here needs to have a little angular bend. And so if I kind of just grab it with my pliers about halfway and I bend it so that the little wire ends are here on the inside where the stone would be, then we can get a little angle in it for our stone to sit in. Now if it works out for you, because this is hard to bend it so that it's perfectly equal on each side, these little wraps, sometimes you bend it and this is like a little taller or vice versa. So that's why I like to do a whole bunch of these wraps instead of just a few, because this way you can unravel and just cut off a little bit if this was taller to bring it back down to match the other side. So that's kind of my little tip for that. So I'm gonna grab my stone here, my little Cinnabar stone, and I am holding it there, its little point inside of here, and I am bending the wires. You can put it down on a flat surface, sometimes that is easier, but I have to hold it here in front of the camera. So it's going a little bit to the side. I'm just gonna adjust. There we go. That should be good. I'm just putting little bends with my fingers so the wires come together like this. And now without the stone, I can just kind of reinforce the little bends here. Can even just hold this together and adjust as needed. Everything looks good and centered. One really important thing that you want to pay attention to is that these wires here on the side are staying in their order. Like the top wire stays on the top, because what'll happen sometimes is they'll crisscross and you won't notice, and you'll press them here and they will be out of order and it'll mess up your frame. So with these wires, one set of the 3 wires is just kind of lined up right next to or on top of, if you hold it like this, the other set. That's how you want it to be. And we're just grabbing that wire again, our thin wire, the half round, and I am grabbing a little tail end again and I'm wrapping it around, and once it starts to get somewhat short like it is now, I'm just going to push this down a little closer. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to feed it here. It's going through the back and onto the front, and here on the front we're just going to grab it, we're just going to pull on it, and we're going to trim it off. And that's kind of how I like to get rid of the wire end so it doesn't unravel. So now that we got that started and we got these connected, what we're going to do is we're going to take the frontmost 2 wires. So if you follow this wire up and this wire up, here they are, the frontmost 2, and we're going to bend them forward together, and the back ones, we're just ever so slightly, just to give myself some room, bend those back. So I'm going to grab this wire that I've been working on, and instead of going around all of them, I'm going to go around just these 2. Now, because it's connected to the spool and it will get twisted, I have to guide it with my hand, and I have to turn the piece to kind of just wrap the wire around those 2 wires. And this is going to be your bail. About 1 inch is usually good, a little shorter for a smaller pendant perhaps. Mine is probably on the smaller end, so maybe just a smidge shorter than 1 inch. But basically I have to continue and do this for a little bit, so I'm just going to do it real quick off camera so you don't watch me sitting here turning and turning this piece. All right, that's looking nice and tall. I can measure what it ended up being, but it's up to you. Yeah, it's a little bit less than 1 inch. See that? Maybe like 25 millimeters, but it doesn't have to be perfect or exact. I never end up measuring mine when I do them. I just kind of eyeball, because it'll just, your bail might be slightly bigger or slightly smaller, and that's okay. And you might want a bail that's bigger. Like if you have a really thick necklace or like a beaded necklace that you want to put through here, then you definitely want it to be larger. So I'm going to trim that so that the wire end is here. This is going to be kind of the back, so this is the front. That's the back. And I'm just going to press down on the wire end and then just press down on all of this like that. And what we're going to do now is we're going to flip it over to the front, and here on the front we're going to take, see these wires, how there's like 2 on this side and 2 on the other side, so we're going to separate them. And now we're going to take this bail. So if you want to shape your bail around something, like a round object, like a little stick or a little super tiny pencil, I guess. Usually pencils are quite too thick for a bail, but some kind of small one or some kind of tool. They sell like bail making pliers, but I like to just eyeball it, and I just put a curve in it with my finger, and that is easiest for me. And then I just try to get where the wrap ends to go right there where that connection is, like this. And then I just press down on that with my pliers, and then I take these wires and I push them through, so they're going through and up, and here's our bail. And then here we're just going to take this one here, the leftmost one, and we're going to wrap it around, so it's going around. And then here on the back I'm going to trim it but leave myself a little wire end, and I'm just gonna tuck that in and press down on that. All right, so that makes the bail connected. Now it's not gonna go anywhere. And this other wire is just kind of extra. You can do the same thing with it that we just did on the other side, or you can just trim it off. And I know that right now you can see like this isn't looking very neat. You see like wire ends and stuff here, but that is gonna get covered up, so that's okay. So this is a point at which I like to put the stone in, because if we keep maneuvering and doing things, we might misshape the frame a little bit, and we don't want to do that. We want the stone to fit in perfectly. So putting my stone in, the first thing I do is just here on the back. You actually don't have to have the stone in for this part. It might be easier if you're having trouble with the stone. It might be easier to not have it in, or just kind of push it forward, because you want to grab only the backmost wire. So be careful not to grab multiple wires, and put a bend in it like this on each side, and that's going to trap it from the back. And now we're going to take these little edges here, the very frontmost wires, and see if you can kind of separate them a little bit from the other wire. Create a little gap like that. So to hold the stone from the front, we're going to put our pliers here around this wire that we just separated, and we're going to push them down as far as they go, trying to get them right there to where that little connection starts that we made, and put a bend. And then same thing here, a bend. And then just press down on these little angles. Sometimes there's a gap there that forms, and you want that to be up against the stone. You don't want there to be a gap. And now we're going to finish off these wires here. So I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna bend it to the side, and I'm gonna put a little curve in it with my finger so it makes a little swoop. You might have seen this. I do this swoop a lot. It's one of my oldest things. I have a really old tutorial that is all the swoops if you want to see that. But in this one, I'm gonna make this a little different, and we're gonna have a really cool hammered swirl. So I'm just cutting and tucking that little end away. Something a little different and fun that I'm gonna do, so this isn't, you know, too similar to all my swoopy pendants, is for this next wire. You don't have to do this, totally optional, but I'm gonna wrap my half round wire around it. Just gives it some texture, just a little bit of a different look. You can see how it turns out for me, and then determine whether you like the look of that, because it does kind of add a little bit of bulk because the wire starts looking thicker. But if you like it, definitely something you can try. So I'm just wrapping my half round wire. I'm getting it started by wrapping the little end of it. And then I'm going to use my pliers to push it down on that wire end. And then you just do this for a little bit. If you do it too long, it's not going to slide up and down because it'll be like really connected. So we're going to slide it all the way down and just keep going with this. And then when it starts getting some length here, we're just going to see if this is long enough. If not, we can continue. So I'm not trimming this wire off yet. I want to follow my other wire with this wire. Okay, so it's not long enough. If you can see, this is not going to reach all the way across. So just going to do this a little bit longer. All right, let's see, is that long enough yet? Almost, we're getting there. I like to have there be just a slight gap. I think that looks good. All right, that is very close. Just a few more wraps here. And then we'll be able to just finish this wire off in the same way that we did the other wire. So I'm just gonna go ahead and trim that now. I'm trying to do it here on the back so this little wire end isn't visible. Pushing that little wire end down. And then coming back to the front here, we're just gonna follow that wire around. So here's what that looks like, and then here it is. So we're just gonna trim and tuck away that little wire end. And just like that. All right, so now we have these two wires. So one of my wires is gonna be the swirl, and this wire is just going to swoop across. It's up to you. There's another thing I want to show you. So you can have the wire just as it is. You can wrap your half round wire around it, or last but not least, you can twist it. So I'm just going to show you the twisting. You just hold the wire and twist the actual piece, and it puts this nice pattern. And the more you do it, the more fine the pattern gets. So this is kind of a cool look. If you do it too much, it's going to be like hard to even see the twist because it's going to be super, super twisted. And so then I'm just going to bring it across. And again, just tuck it away here, just like we did. Now you have all your options of what you can do with these wires. And you could have, instead of twisting this one, you could have twisted the other one, and you could have wrapped the half round wire around this one. You can mix and match with this. That's what I'm trying to say. So the little wire end, you can kind of see it from the front. I'm gonna try to push it in there. It's gonna get a little bit covered up with the swirl anyways, but I'm trying to kind of push on that little wire end so it's not as obvious. All right, now it's time to do the swirl. So this is the fun bit, but also the trickiest. So we're gonna swoop this wire down like this. And it's really hard to predict how much wire you need to make the swirl. So what I like to do is I like to make it, we're gonna end up like redoing it, but I like to make it first by just kind of bending these around and around so that you kind of have an idea all right, so something like this roughly, and I'm gonna give myself a little bit of room here. And now I'm just gonna kind of unswirl it a bit so that I can get in there. And what you can do is you can actually just lift this up if that'll make it easier for you to work with. And I'm gonna grab that little tip, that little end. So the way I like to do my swirls is to grab that little end and to squish it with my brown nose pliers. So see how it's kind of coming to a point now because I squished it. I don't know why, I just really like doing it that way. So now I'm just curving that, and I am making my swirl. So once you've swirled it this much, it's kind of hard to use your round nose pliers because they kind of get in the way at this point, and we're just going to use our regular pliers to shape it. Make sure that the spacing is good. So that looks like a good nice swirl. Let's see how it fits in here. So sometimes it's cool, your stone might be a little smaller, or maybe you made a bigger gap here and the swirl will fit into the gap. So I'm just doing it a little bit more. All right, this is how This is how I want it to be. So now we're gonna lift it up again. Just be careful that you are very gentle with your wire. If you overbend your wires, like up and down, it'll end up snapping your wire. So we're just gonna lift it just a little bit, carefully like this. And now it's time to do the hammering. So now we're ready for some hammering. So I'm gonna just lay this swirl here on this iron block, and this is my chasing hammer. And I'm gonna take this flat side of the chasing hammer and I'm just gonna hammer it. And you can see the swirl is getting flatter, and you want to also just make sure you hammer like all around to make it flat evenly. All right, and now, actually, let me see if I can zoom in any further. Now we're gonna take the rounded side of the chasing hammer, and that is gonna add some texture. All right, and now we are done with our textured hammered swirl. All right, so now that we've hammered it, we are just gonna slowly and carefully put it back, bend it and curve it back. Sometimes I like to just take my pliers as well. All right, that looks good. So now we have to connect it, and we are gonna connect it really well because we don't want this to lift up. It's not connected to anything, so if it gets caught on hair or a fuzzy sweater, it's just gonna lift right back up. And because it's quite big, in this case, I think just connecting it on one side is not enough, because then the other side can kind of like halfway lift. So we're gonna connect it on both sides. So I'm taking a little piece, cut yourself 2 pieces about 3 inches long of that half round wire, and I'm just trying to find a place here where I can tuck it through. So I tucked it through underneath this wire, and I'm just gonna do a few little wraps with it to connect it, to get it started. Usually about 3 wraps should be good. 1, 2, and then the third one. The third one we're not going to put all the way through there. And now we're just going to trim that third one so that I can take that little end, that little wire end, and I can just kind of curve and tuck it under there. And that is our third wrap. Now I'm going to hold the 3 that we made. I'm going to take this, because if you don't hold, sometimes it just like turns around and then your little wire end is like at the front instead of being tucked in. So I'm raising this up. There's our little connection, and we're just going to slide it up here. It should slide because it's only 3 wraps, so it's not, should be good. All right, so now we're going to put this through this little edge wire of our swirl, and this could be hard. Try to get this wire to come out, not here, but so we can wrap around that. There we go, finally, that same wire that we've been wrapping around. There it is, and now we're just gonna do a few wraps around only this little edge wire. So if you want, you can just do 3 wraps so it matches the number of wraps that you have up there before you made the connection to the swirl. Sometimes it's kind of hard to get this little end to tuck under there. So what you can do is you can actually just grab this wire and lift it up ever so slightly to create a little gap, and then we'll push it back down afterwards, just so we can work this wire underneath. So 1, 2, and this will be 3. I'm just gonna do 4. I don't know why. Just want this to go a little further down. All right, and now I'm just gonna trim off that excess. And now we're just gonna take that little tiny wire end and tuck it in there. And you can just bring this whole connection closer together, these little wraps, so there's no spacing in between them. So now one side of our swirl is nice and connected, but this one is still pretty loose and it can lift up. So we're just gonna do the same thing. Oh, did we not push this side down? We're gonna push this side down that we lifted up. Now we're just gonna gently lift up this side, grab our half round wire, just gonna tuck it through there, and just gonna make a few wraps. So that's 1, 2, and the third one. You need at least 3. Feel free to do more than 3. The more you do, the more strong the connection will be. And now we're just gonna tuck that little wire end away into there. And now we're gonna hold these 3 wraps as we lift up this wire, and we are gonna push this up to the right distance. All right, this is good. This seems like where the wire is closest to the edge, so we're just gonna wrap around like that, connect it, and now wrap only around this front wire. All right, and now we can trim that off and tuck it away. And bring this whole thing closer together. And that is it. That is our finished hammer swirl pendant. Here's the back of it. So I hope you enjoyed, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.